What's up, everybody? Welcome back to week 2 of Fathers and Sons. Last week, we talked with the amazing Bishop about the role of a father. And this week, we are talking about the role of a son. And so I have literally a whole notebook full of notes that I took. And to be quite honest with you, I had so many people inbox me, sending me sticky notes and messages about how much this conversation has blessed them. And it's completely interesting to me because, as you and I both know, it's not necessarily a popular topic, so to speak, but those who are listening and gleaning from it, literally without dramatics or anything, have said that the information that you shared was really life changing. And even if I'm honest myself, after we had our conversation, I had to sit and have to unlearn what I thought a spiritual father was and
Wow.
now relearn what a spiritual father is because my context was wrong. And so now that I'm having a better context, I'm like, okay. And I ain't gonna lie, it's interesting. Like, I really feel like I'm in a very uncomfortable space because of the things I've been through as it relates to this subject, and then now learning the biblical principles and all of that. But I'm here for it, but I can't lie and say it's uncomfortable. So welcome back to week 2. How you feeling, sir?
Hey, man, I'm feeling good, and thank you again for having me on. This is it's a timely subject.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people don't know is that it is a prophetic subject.
Yes, sir.
That this is something that was prophesied a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that because the Lord has laid this on your heart, this is something that is actually not getting ready to happen
Mm-hmm.
about fathers and sons, but it's actually something that is already in progress.
Yes.
As far as some people in the church are concerned, they're not necessarily aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
but it is happening. And I believe we're going to see an uptick in
Yeah.
this kind of dialogue, this kind of dynamic with fathers, sons. Um, this is a whole new level and a whole new place of spirituality. So, thanks again for having me, and thank you for, creating this subject matter. It's timely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm glad you accepted. Now, listen, y'all, before we get started, if you're watching this broadcast, I just made it public on my phone. So share this with all those, your sons, your daughters. Although the concept is fathers and sons, this relates to daughters as well. So come on in, ask your questions, and let's rock in. So I just kind of want to jump over some points from my notes that I took last week. You said
Sure.
that you don't have to know a person to honor a person. When you see a judge, you don't know him or her, but you honor them anyway. And we were talking about how honor is key. And I thought that was such a major nugget that you shared because
Mm.
oftentimes we feel like because I don't know a person or I haven't grown up with the person or I'm not a member of this person's church, so to speak, or whatever, that means you cannot honor them. But I truly believe that honor, everything rises and falls as it relates to honor. So that was one thing that stood out to me.
Yeah.
The other part you said was that as it relates to a biological father and a spiritual father, is to some degree they are the same, except the difference is, of course, they're in two different genres, but ultimately they both are a source of financial support, family support, their presence, their strength. And you said that you're supposed to be there so that way when the son grows up, they can then stand on their own 2 feet. And I
Yeah.
have so many notes, but the main thing I want to get to is how you even said fathers dream and have visions, but sons take the vision, they run with the vision, and they make that thing happen. So let's kind of open that. From your perspective, what is the role of a son in a dynamic of a spiritual father and son and all of that?
Well, the role of a son actually begins with the role of the father.
Mhm.
Uh, I consider, these are my words, I consider a father to be an architect.
That's funny.
And then the son now becomes the builder.
Mm.
Uh, I consider a father to be the one that is modeled, and the son becomes a model.
Wow.
So it is exactly what Jesus did.
Yeah.
Jesus actually came, his primary purpose. Yes, he came to save. Yes, he came to deliver. Yes, he came to die. Yes, he came to heal. You can name a whole lot of things that Jesus came to do.
Hmm.
But what is primary is that he came to model who the Father was.
Wow.
Jesus said, as a son, he said, if you've seen me, uh, you've seen the Father.
Yeah, yeah.
So the Father is, is the one that put the plan together. He's the architect.
Hmm.
But everything is built around the chief cornerstone. He's the builder.
Hmm. Wow.
And so you have someone who models. So this is where we can sort of veer off from just talking about biological or natural fathers.
Hmm.
Really keep this pretty much in the spiritual realm, because when God talks about fathers and sons, he really uses it as more of a spiritual example, to speak to a deeper truth,
Hmm.
more than just a biological example of a father. So we can look at Jesus, and that's where we see the perfect son.
Right, right.
You know? Now, Adam was also a son of God.
Hmm.
Scripture says that Adam was, he was the son of God. But what Adam did, Adam lost his perfection.
Mm.
And now here comes the last Adam, who is Jesus, demonstrates perfection, and he's actually reflecting the perfection of the Father.
Yeah.
So there are things that we can strive for spiritually that we could never come to a full lifestyle naturally.
Hmm.
The natural father and son has its limitations, but the
Hmm.
spiritual father and son, there are no limitations.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you use the word architect, and I chuckled because literally today I was
Mhm.
sitting, I mean, every day, not even be deep, but every day I take time to meditate. I take time to read something edifying, and I'm in a space of rediscovering a lot of different things. And so to that end, the word that came to me today was that of architect. And God
Yeah,
was telling me, I want you to study the dynamics of the human mind and just different things, but as it relates from a scientific perspective, psychological perspective, and an architectural perspective. So the fact that that's the word that you just came out the gate with, just kind of, that was funny. Um, but it's interesting though, because everything is based off of models and structures, even as it relates to the physical world and architecture and artificial intelligence. These are all structures and models that come from either the human mind or the spiritual mind, that it's like the world is trying to recreate or make. And it's just really, really interesting. But to that end, I also was thinking about 2018 when we were at the Engineer Strong conference.
yeah,
And
yeah,
what was amazing about that moment was, to some degree, that was like the introduction of who you were, right? And it's so cool. Was it 2018? No, well, no, you came 17. I'm sorry. But 18 was when that moment happened with the men and the women. And it was almost as if when you came around, it put everything into a certain structure and an order.
yeah.
And it was a dynamic moment that happened between the men taking their rightful place, with you coming onto the scene and all of that. But it was interesting because I can almost say now, looking back at it, around that time is when things started shifting with me
Mm.
personally behind the scenes, when you came on the scene, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so then to fast forward, it's like, oh, okay, I'm just watching, I'm just watching, just doing whatever. But it's just interesting what happens, because you, being the head, the father, the leader that you are, it just brings a balance that, you know, if it weren't there, a lot of things would be out of place. Another
yeah,
point,
yeah.
oftentimes within ministries and churches and all of that, We thank God for the women. We thank God for our mothers, both natural, spiritual, and all of that. But there is still nothing like the male voice. There is
Yeah.
still nothing like prime example, another part from last week, and I'll hush. Is when you said, I think I asked you the role of a son as it relates to a spiritual father. It is not my place to try to heal or take on the burden, if you will,
Yeah.
of the spiritual father. And
Hmm.
so many times I used to do that thinking I have to prove myself by trying to be who I'm not called to be in a particular individual's life. But you basically said, I don't have to do that.
Right. Right.
And when you said that, it freed me.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not. It's not. That's not the true definition. That's why
Mhm.
I constantly repeat it, and I don't think a lot of people do it. But you have to define every relationship. If
Yeah.
the relationship is properly defined, you'll never step out of line. You
Right.
know, and then take on responsibilities that are not yours.
Hmm.
Um, and so when you try to, for instance, we were talking about when you try to somehow correct a father,
Hmm.
and there ought to be others in place that understand what a father truly is, and a father himself should have accountabilities. Those are the people, if maybe the mother or the wife,
Hmm.
that place of correction. But it's pretty rough. I think so many children have been devastated because somewhere along the line they've been put in a position where they referee between moms and dads,
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes. And so that's why if everybody knows their place, define their role,
Yeah.
uh, most likely it'll keep everything in balance, and everybody will basically have a healthier
Right.
relationship. But when you get out of bounds, it violates a whole lot of principles as far as relationships are concerned.
Absolutely. So let's unpack that as it relates to boundaries. So, of course, my first thought would be boundaries are set at the beginning. So, then what happens during the relationship where if a line is crossed? What is the process to then correct that and then rightfully establish this is a no crossing zone?
Well, the correction, as far as understanding how to bring things back into alignment, has to have a foundation, and of course, the foundation, of course, is the Word of God.
Hmm.
That's that's primarily where we get our definition from.
Right.
As a father, I've got to have a relationship with God myself.
Hmm.
And then, something is wrong when a father cannot hear God or will not hear God. Yeah, a good example is the high priest Eli.
Hmm.
He had a couple of sons, and the Bible says that during that time, Eli was not hearing from God, that God was not speaking prophetically.
Yeah.
The Bible says there was not a word from the Lord. But the truth is, God was speaking to Eli. Eli just refused to listen.
That's good.
So
Hmm.
here's what happens. You know, God brings in a boy by the name of Samuel, and he begins to speak to Samuel. And he tells Samuel everything that's going to happen to Eli and
Hmm.
his. So because Eli would not listen, God spoke to this child. And then Eli asked Samuel, well, what did the Lord say? Now, could you imagine that?
Right. Right.
A father asking a child, basically his spiritual son,
Hmm.
what does God say? And then, of course, the child told him. And then Eli said, well, it's true, and let everything. Now, Samuel never corrected him.
Hmm.
He never corrected him. My point is that God will find a way to communicate his word, his will to the fathers.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order for things to be correct, we've got to have order as far as the relationship is concerned,
Yeah.
order in the family. And again, every father has to be accountable to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm accountable
Mm-hmm.
to my wife is accountable to me.
Yeah.
It's mutual accountability. And once we understand how to be accountable, those are that's the area right there.
Mm-hmm.
Those two areas of accountability that keep everything correct and in order. That's how things are restored. But with
Mm-hmm.
no accountability, then you're not going to have any order.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. And I'm glad you used that analogy because sometimes I'm looking at comments, people are saying, teach Bishop, what's up, y'all? I see you. But I'm glad you used that analogy because that analogy is what's happening a lot of times, wherein, or I'll just speak for myself. I've been in scenarios wherein I was with a particular leader
Right.
and submitted all of that. But then it got to a point where it seemed as though they fell off and weren't hearing from God. And so, of course, not even just as a son, but just a caring individual,
Yeah.
I'm praying because I'm like, no, I'm gonna cover you. I'm gonna pray for you. I'm gonna, do my best, whatever. And then, of course, God would then begin to reveal certain things to me about what's happening. But of course, the dynamic is in terms of ranking and order, I'm not the head. So then you're in a place where it's like, so what do you do? And so now in that story, though, at least he came and said, hey, what is God saying? But then you have scenarios wherein the leader does not want to know, which is why going back, like I said earlier, when you had made the statement about you don't have to stay in that type of situation, you can free yourself. That healed me. Even prime example, I don't know if you were in the room at the conference when I had my little moment, but
No, I wasn't there.
oh my God. So I got to show you the video offline. but but what was interesting though about that moment was Dr. Trim asked the question and she was saying, what would you tell a former leader, colleague, the generation ahead of you, or whatever? And mind you, of course, as you know, I'm hosting the conference. I done lost my voice from being loud and yelling and everything else. And the whole time I'm on the panel, I didn't even want to talk. I'm like, let everybody else talk. I don't have anything to say. I'm good. But then I started feeling bad because I'm like, well, I'm up here. I was asked to be up here. Now I'm not speaking. But when she asked that question, everything in me started boiling because what people didn't know the entire time I was hosting and doing whatever, I was very burdened and I was very heavy, if you will. And I was trying to push past what I was feeling. But in that moment, I had my breakthrough moment, if you will, which turned to a lot of good came from it. I will say that. But of course, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But there was a moment where I said, let me go. And when and what I meant by that was, yeah, I could free myself. Yeah, I could do whatever, but I'm big on order. I'm big on ranking. I'm big on honor. And one thing I never want is for it to be said that I stepped out of my place. So if
Yeah.
I'm gonna be out of my place, you gonna tell me to get out. you know. But I'm bringing that up to say is that Dr. Trim had said, if they don't let you go, let yourself go. Now, I get that. But if I'm honest, I was like, yeah, but am I supposed to? Like, I mean, and I trust, but it was just weird. But again, so when you said last week, and I don't know what it is, and I guess because you're the male voice, like I don't know if it's a man thing. I don't know what it is, but when you said that, I said, you know what? He right. I don't have to do this, even though that's long gone, but it just did something. So are you able to even maybe speak to what that is, that male frequency, that male, what is that?
Yeah, I think there is a frequency. And on the other hand, when uh, you have to also consider that what you're talking about, for instance, what you went through, um, that's also psychologically, spiritually, even physically, it's traumatic.
Yes.
You know, it's filled with a lot of drama and trauma.
Hmm. Yes.
And when you have that kind of experience, uh, the conscious mind may, you know, so just sort of suppress it.
Hmm.
It's still there in the sub.
Hmm. It looks like the camera froze, but I'm still seeing here. Let's see. If you can hear me, I think the camera froze.
And yeah, I think you're coming back.
Yeah, just came back and then you disappeared. So if you can, just come back in.
All right, let me see if I can make that happen.
Cool. I still hear you. This is the camera went out. But y'all, as you're watching, as we're talking, go ahead and submit your questions. And what he was just talking about was how a lot of spiritual sons, mainly my situation, but a lot of spiritual sons and young men in general, go through situations wherein they deal with a lot of trauma and things of that sort. And so to that end, you have to process that. Let's see. It looks like it's coming back in. Let's see. Let's see. Perfect. You're back.
Let's see. Are you there?
Yep,
Are you
we're good
there?
to go. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
great. Yeah, I can hear you. How about me? You can hear me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you were
Okay.
saying, that scenario was one of trauma and all of that.
Yeah, it was trauma, but here's what we have to understand. When it comes to the idea of honor and respect,
Hmm.
sometimes the greatest respect and honor that you can give a person of authority is to walk away.
Mm.
You know, not
Wow.
not stick around trying to figure anything out. You can save yourself a lot of you know a lot of burdens and cares
Yeah.
just by walking away, simply because it is a spiritual father son issue,
Hmm.
not necessarily a. Here's something that I think separates biological sons from spiritual sons.
Hmm.
You'll always biologically be the son of your father,
Right.
but you don't always have to biologically be a spiritual son to a father.
Mm.
That relationship can be severed,
Hmm.
and you can go your own way. Uh,
Wow.
we see that in scripture, where I believe it was Elisha and Gehazi,
Hmm.
when he, you know, decided that he was going to go behind his master's back.
Hmm.
And he was actually playing the same role that Elijah played with Elijah.
Yeah.
But that relationship was severed. And there was, if you read it, there was a curse pronounced uh, on the son,
Hmm.
so to speak. So it can be severed,
Yeah.
and you save yourself a lot of time. Uh, Spiritual fathers, spiritual sons are not always necessarily forever.
Mm.
It's temporary.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, to show you how temporary it is, there will be no spiritual fathers and sons in heaven.
That's absolutely true. Right.
You know
Yeah.
what? I'm not going to go up there saying, "Hey, I'm Levi's spiritual father."
Right. Right. Right.
They're they're not even natural fathers, and who have sons in heaven. Those
Hmm.
relationships are severed.
Yeah.
We get into eternity. So
Hmm.
we have to have the proper balance. What God will do, God will send. Paul used an interesting term. He said, "You have not many fathers."
Hmm.
It's plural. You
Right.
have not many fathers, which means that depending on your place of spiritual maturation, there could be someone coming along to father you at each stage
Hmm.
of your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
I've had a number of men in my life to come along at a certain stage in my life that were fathers to me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't just have one, but it's one at a time.
Right,
It's not
right.
all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where understanding the spiritual dynamic of what it means to be a spiritual father and a spiritual son.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I think we have to understand it in order that we can properly, conduct ourselves in a spiritual journey. Now, there may be somebody that may be much, much more meaningful to you as a father. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I could think of right now my first pastor. He was a great spiritual father.
Yeah.
He's still alive, but he's no longer my spiritual father.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember him very fondly as a spiritual father that was there at my beginning stages of my Christian walk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now I've moved on. So a lot of times, once again, when we try, we can't take what's spiritual and turn it into a natural. Like I
Yeah.
said, a biological father biologically will always be a father. They may not have influence, there may not be any connection
Mm-hmm.
biologically. They're always going to be a father.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritually, you can always claim someone as fathers, but they're different men at different times that God will connect you to. And if you happen to have a spiritual father that you have for all of your life, well, that's a good thing too. But I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to be very careful not to try and put this into some type of how can I put it, a rule.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very sensitive to where we are in life to know when a father has taken me as far as he can go.
Right, right. So I'm so glad you said that. And just something as simple as that, that is yet so profound.
Mm.
Because when a season is over, especially in this type of dynamic, when it comes to sons and fathers, I think, and speaking from the son perspective,
Yeah.
you don't often know how do you have that conversation to say, "Oh, hey, father, this is this is over." Or, of course, you wouldn't say it like that, but it's like, how would you have that conversation? Because in being completely transparent,
It's
that's
not, yeah, it's not a conversation that you have to have.
mm,
It's a reality that you have to know.
yeah, hmm
And then, I'm not, I wouldn't go back to any one of the men that have helped me along the way and say, well, I didn't have to go back and say it was over. Uh,
hmm
Life has a way of moving on.
hmm
You just when a son is leaving home, say a son is separating from his mother and father and going to be married,
hmm
you don't have to tell them, well, mom and dad, it's over.
right.
They already know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the son already knows. It's just how life works. And
hmm
if you understand how life works, you just end up going your way because once again, we're already in the time right now where the prophetic word that the angel gave Zechariah, the high priest, he and Elizabeth, they were having a child. And of course, the child's name was John the Baptist.
hmm
And of course, a lot of people fail to realize that one of the assignments of John the Baptist was to turn the hearts of the father back to the children.
hmm
Now when we talk about John the Baptist, you rarely hear about that. In
Right.
fact, it's in the book of Luke, the first chapter and the 17th verse.
hmm
So this is something that's very important to God because he includes the issue of fathers and sons in the assignment of John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at how important that is in God's scheme of things, he has in that prophetic word spoken by the angel, fathers are looking for sons.
Mm-hmm.
He never talks about sons having to look for fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be men in place, even right now, in these days that we live,
Mm-hmm.
where they will open their hearts and pursue sons.
Mm-hmm.
And sons won't have to be necessarily looking for fathers.
Mm-hmm.
Sons will long for fathers,
Mm-hmm.
but fathers will look for sons. The heart of the father will be turned towards the children.
That's good. That's good. That's good. So then what do you say? And I hate to keep going back to this, but I know a lot of people who have been in these types of relationships have a misconception concerning it and all of that. So
Yeah.
then what happens when you leave a tainted situation and then a God-fearing, God-ordained father comes along and embraces, and because of the pain of the last season, you don't know how to operate in the new season?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, I think that there is a grace that not many people even ask for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the grace, see, because when we're traumatized, we have what is called cellular level memory,
Mm-hmm.
where everything that has happened, it's a part of our, it's a part of our thought life.
Mm-hmm.
There is a grace, and I think the biggest issue is that we try to practice so many commands based on our willingness to do it, but we just
Mm-hmm.
the power to carry it out.
Wow.
So there is a grace where Paul says, I am forgetting. Now, before he forgets those things which are behind, he
Mm-hmm.
he begins to just name all of the things that he's been through, all
Wow.
the things that he accomplished. And then he says, all of these things are dung to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, I'm forgetting those things which are behind. I'm reaching forward to those things which are before. I press.
Yeah.
All
Towards the
right.
mark.
Yeah. So now, so what you have there is a grace, because you're talking about a guy who violated the church. You talk about
Mm-hmm.
a guy who agreed with the murder of Stephen. You talk about a guy who threw Christian parents in jail, if you will, and left children as orphans. You're talking about a guy that just ransacked the church.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has this, the audacity to say, I am forgetting. You don't just forget things like that.
Right.
So here's what he was saying: I know what I did
Mm-hmm.
does not have an impact on who I am and where I'm going now.
Mm.
So, in times where there has been a traumatic issue, I know how to ask the Lord, Lord, give me grace
Mm.
to forget, not in the sense that it leaves my mind,
Right.
but in the sense that it does not impact my future.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not, you asked me a question the other week, and I don't know why I am this way.
Mm-hmm.
I have never been, I've never been connected to my past to such a degree that it has hindered me from walking in my present and my future.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people that are. You don't have to, if you ever develop a relationship with God the Father,
Mm-hmm.
there are areas that He will fill that a natural father could never fill.
Mm-hmm.
And He has this ability to make us whole if we're willing to receive that kind of grace.
Right.
But that's where Yeah, I know of a lot of folk that have been hurt by biological fathers, spiritual fathers, so on and so
Mhm.
forth, and church fathers, you name it. It happens to everybody,
Right.
but there is a grace for that. Just like there,
Absolutely.
just like there's an app for everything.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because I definitely know I'm operating under a grace. Because if I were to really go into all the stuff that I've experienced and all that, I'm sure, just like we all, whether it be in other scenarios, people be like, well, how'd you live through that? How'd you go through that? Whatever, And I definitely believe that one of the mandates on my life is to be a forerunner, if you will, in these type of conversations, because there are so many people that do not understand. And so for me, although I'm over things, I don't have a problem sometimes going back to it to visit it for the sake of conversation, dialogue, and helping somebody. Because one thing about me, which is when I think I finally realized I was called, is because I said, okay, there is so much going on that I'm not doing to myself that clearly there must be something greater to this
Yeah,
than myself,
yeah,
because one thing I'm sure God, well, He does know, is there is nothing that I've been through or that I've dealt with or deal with that I don't mind being open about, talking about, and but using it in the context of being a lesson for somebody to understand and grow. Um, because people need to know. They need to know. But
yeah,
what you said, that was powerful. That was powerful. So let's say for that person again who was burdened, manipulated, all that, and they're now moving forward and they're in their grace and they're stepping into another level of manhood, adulthood, even spiritually, all of that. As a son, what are we supposed to do in terms of I guess something to ask is the next phase. Do we just continue to seek God as to our next, as it relates to life? Um, or do we pull on the coat strings of like yourself and say, hey, do you know what God is saying from my next? Do you know what's what? Or is it a combination of both as necessary? I
yeah,
hope I'm making that clear.
yeah, yeah. I can understand that. I think all of us long for, of course, the relationship with the Father. That's a part of our humanness, our humanity. You know,
Right.
we long for that. But my advice to people is that until those people come along, you have to be the best son you know to be to yourself,
Mm,
because fathers will come and find you,
yeah.
or or the Lord will direct you to the person, and then you would go. There is a person, I won't call his name, but a very very close spiritual, someone I consider a spiritual father, passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and I was at the funeral, and
Mm-hmm.
the funeral was over. I walked out into the parking lot, and I said, "Well, Lord, he's gone. What am I going to do now?"
Right.
And, and immediately the Lord said, "You see that man right there?" And he pointed someone out. I knew the person. I've been in meetings with them. I heard them speak. They were, powerful. And he said, ask that person right there if he will cover you.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, immediately, pulled him to the side and told him the situation. Actually, I called him on the phone, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "Okay." He said, "Let's just take it one day at a time." He
Mm-hmm.
didn't. He didn't rush in to be a father to me.
Right, right.
He took time to learn me and to build trust and conversation, and just to find out who I was. I took time to find out who he was.
Mhm.
Our It started out as father son, but it turned into a great friendship.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, um, if you say that you don't have a father at this particular time in your life, then God knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, if a father was needed at this time, you would have one.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Lord basically showed me.
Nice.
But during the time I never had one, it's only because they were not needed. It may be something that I wanted, but it was not anything that was needed.
Right.
And many times when you find yourself in a place where you don't have it, it just simply means that that's something that God knows that you can do without for the time being until the right time comes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I agree to that. It reminds me of kind of like I was even saying, or I didn't say, I wrote a note in my phone. I was talking about how it's my belief that every time a new season comes, it first comes
Mhm.
by way of new people or things of that sort. And so
Yeah,
that's why I was even saying when you came, it was like, and I wasn't even looking at that dynamic. It's interesting because I'm like, oh, I got this over here, whatever, whatever, but not even knowing
yeah,
what
yeah,
was happening. And it was almost like, and then here you are. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and I guess if I'm honest in trying to still comprehend, your posture is so much different than what I'm accustomed to. And and even those who look to me, it's so funny because even at the last week's video, I had someone come to me and they said, "Wow, that answers so many questions." Because I wasn't sure. Should I be texting you all the time? Should I be calling you all the time? Should I be reaching out all the time? And it's like, no, but that doesn't mean I don't have your back. I'm not covering you. I'm not praying for you. I'm not, all of that. And so, like you said, I think it's just the dynamic of having these types of conversations to figure out what the dynamic is. Because
yeah,
both naturally and spiritually, every relationship is different. And I also agree. You had said something earlier as it relates to the phase of life you're in. The phase of life that I'm in right now is the
yeah,
space of solidification. It's a
yeah.
space of I know who I am as a man. I know what I desire and what I want. Even prime example, which we'll get into this next week, because the other part of this is about how to operate as a husband. And it was so funny. I was telling my biological mama the other day, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but anybody that knows me knows I've always been, you know what? I ain't trying to get married no time soon. I ain't trying to do this. I ain't trying to do that. But it's something in me that is now to a point where it's like, I don't know when, I don't know whatever, but I feel like I will be married soon. And I see the importance of it with where I am going, the calling on my life, and all of that. And so that's why, even with this conversation, there's really no other person that came to mind but you, because you're not someone who is in a space of trying to figure out who they are, what they want, blah, 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 where in other dynamics that I was in, there was so much chaos, and I'm like, okay, I can't, I can't, So, so yeah, it's just very, 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 very interesting. But I think I had some questions coming through, so I want to pull it up and get to some questions. I
Okay,
think, what's up, Davita? Davita said last week, you briefly spoke about pastors versus fathers. How do you determine the difference? And y'all, before he answers that, if any of you have any questions, go ahead and throw your questions in because we got a few minutes left. I want to go ahead and get your questions in so we could do that. But yeah, so how do you determine the difference between a father versus a pastor?
okay, great. I'm glad I heard some interference, but it just left. I don't know what you did, but it's clear now.
Okay.
Yeah. First, it's very simple. You define a pastor. A pastor has a different role than a father.
Mm, right.
So, so the question would be, what is your definition of a pastor? In order
Mhm.
to understand what that is, you can go to the New Testament, and Paul talks about the qualifications of pastors and elders
Mhm.
and church leaders as a whole. A pastor's role is totally different from a spiritual father's role.
Mm-hmm.
So pastors lead and feed, and a spiritual father probably has more of a hands-on kind of intimate, more a closer relationship than you would a pastor. In order for me to be pastored, I don't even have to know the pastor.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Right, right.
They're churches, very large churches. They're people that sit in very, very large churches. They are pastored all the time by their pastor. I know one pastor in particular. His members come to him and say, "I'm a member of your church." He doesn't even know that. So, it's but a father you should know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you just define the role of a pastor and
Mm-hmm.
define the role of a father. It's a lot of information that you could Google it and you'll get your answers.
Absolutely. Cool. Let's see. I got a few questions here. Let me see what's the good one. As a spiritual father, what kind of son do you want to raise?
I don't get to choose the kind of son.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the example of Elijah and Elisha,
Mm-hmm.
Elijah didn't even know Elisha per se.
Right, right.
It was the Lord that said to Elijah, "Go and leave your mantle, put your mantle on Elisha."
Mm-hmm.
And so he did it, and Elisha ran after Elijah. And Elijah, he said, "Let me go back and let my family know." And
Right.
Elijah said, "Well, what have I done to you?" So we don't get to choose spiritual sons and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually birthed by God, and then they're revealed.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's see. What are the father's expectations for his sons? And of course, this is a conversation with say and daughters. But what is the expectation?
Well, the expectation, as I think I said it last week,
You did. Hmm.
yeah, be able to discern what's spiritual and be able to understand boundary lines. For
Hmm.
instance, let's be very plain. Uh, a natural father would probably have his children over from time to time.
Hmm.
That's not the same issue as a spiritual father. It's not about physical fellowship.
Right, right.
It's about sharing wisdom. It's
Hmm.
about insight. It's about being able to give guidance, instruction,
Hmm.
direction, sharing knowledge.
Hmm.
That's in the realm of the physical. It's not about sitting around the table and having supper and watching television and things.
Right.
So keep
Yeah, no, I
it
agree.
spiritual.
Right. Another question's come through. Oh, that's our dude from London. What's up, bro? It says, how do you get over being hurt by spiritual fathers?
Well, let me say this. There are things that you have to work through, even though it's painful.
Hmm.
You have to give yourself time uh, to heal,
Hmm.
and the quicker you can shift your focus to where you're going instead of where you've been, the healing will take place quicker.
Hmm.
When you are in a place where you've been hurt, generally what hurt does, it causes us to revert to the past.
Hmm.
We go back to the crime of the scene. We replay in our mind over and over again what happened, how it happened, why did it happen.
Hmm.
All of these things, it keeps us in the place of hurt.
Right.
We're going to have some emotions, we're going to have some hurt. However, you have to be able to make a conscious decision. I've got to shift my focus.
Hmm.
I, I can feel the pain. And then I've got to, again, received grace to receive my healing. And I'm telling you, I want to be perfectly clear. I could tell you about a lot of things that have happened to me along the way. You
Right.
know, a lot of things. Um, every one of those things worked out for my good.
Mm-hmm.
Even the wrong things promoted me.
Right. Right.
What somebody meant for evil, God turned it into my good.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So so if you can only see what's ahead of you, you'll be able to move on from it. There's
Mm-hmm.
not one thing that happens to you, happens to me, or anybody else that God has not figured into the scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew we were going to be hurt before we got hurt.
Right.
He
Absolutely.
knew we were going to be abandoned before we got abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
He knew we were going to be lied on and abused before it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I have understood about it and what I've learned to do, even to this day, those things are my burnt offerings.
Mm.
I offer those things up to God as a sacrifice.
That's good.
So I offer up hurt. I offer up pain. I offer up disappointment. I offer it all up. When I offer it up to God, He receives it. But the secret to an offering is that He ministers it back to me
Right.
by way of blessing and healing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you get over hurt. You plead the blood over the pain,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all figured in. That's why all things work together for good, even the hurt,
Absolutely.
the pain, the disappointment. It really does all work. So, and your promotions usually come from people that are against you.
Mm.
You
Mm-hmm.
don't get you rarely get promoted from people that like you.
Right. Right. Right.
You
Yeah.
need you need an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the enemy can be the person closest to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see it as something that God will use to promote you, well, there's no way you'll be thankful. I've had this happen on a number of occasions. God, I thank you for every lie that was told.
Yes, sir.
I thank you for everybody that left me, abandoned me. Thank you for even you didn't cause it, but I want to just give you credit for using it.
Absolutely.
And that's how you get over it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that you said that because that's the space I'm in. I'm like, thank you for every up, down, whatever. Because I've never felt freer in my life. And I've never felt like I feel like myself again. Like I feel
Oh yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. And the people, the people that abandoned us, if they had stuck around, they would have ruined us.
exactly. Exactly. That's
Yeah.
good. Let me get another question here. It says, do you have to prove yourself uh wait, what? Do you have to prove? Okay, yeah. Do you have to prove yourself to have a spiritual father? I guess, or prove yourself to your spiritual father.
Well, no, no more than a baby has to prove himself to his father.
There you have
Does a baby come out of the womb saying, "Father, uh, how do I prove myself?"
it.
All we need to do is look at Jesus.
Yeah.
Before he did anything, period,
Uh
before
huh.
he cast out a demon, before he healed the sick, before he
Mm,
raised the dead, he obeyed the Father and got baptized.
absolutely.
And the Father said, "My son, I'm well pleased."
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, what had Jesus done in order to make the Father well pleased?
Mm,
He hadn't done anything.
right.
So this idea of having to prove yourself, how can a child prove themselves? I
Mm,
I understand what they're saying in that, you know, do I qualify?
right. Right.
Well, if the Lord put the father-son relationship together, he's already qualified both of the people that he's brought together.
Right, right,
We just
right.
live it out. We just live it out.
Absolutely. One more question where it might come out as a statement. This is from me. You
Okay.
had said last week about you can serve your father, but that does not make you a servant. Can you just kind of open that up a little bit for those that might not completely understand? I get what you're saying, but for those that might say, again, because still this thought of proving yourself, even though you just unpack that, but there is this. I don't know if it's cultural. I don't know if it's the African American church, so to speak. I don't know where this mentality comes from, where it seems as though you're not adequately honoring or serving if you're not breaking a sweat or giving your last dime or that's crazy. But yeah, but what's your thoughts on that? Or open it up if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I think that we always have to go back to Scripture,
Mm-hmm.
and let's take Paul and Timothy.
Mm-hmm.
Paul was not Timothy's servant, or Timothy, I should say, was not Paul's servant. Paul said, this is my spiritual son, Timothy.
Right.
He labored alongside of him. I'm sure he served him, but nowhere in Scripture was he a servant to Paul.
Right. 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 Right.
Paul made him a son. Um, and I don't know. I think it's we're living in some really confusing days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are people that are probably so desirous, so hungry for acceptance, affirmation. People want to be affirmed.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we look for that affirmation in other people, and too often times you just don't get it.
Right.
And
Right.
I think this is where it's going to be important that we have to realize that God is pleased with me first. If God is pleased with me, in case I don't please everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
I can still, you know, esteem myself based on the fact that I know God is pleased with me. I don't have to prove anything to God. He knows me anyway.
Right.
So there's a lot of disorder in this area of a spiritual father and a spiritual son, which it's sad, but
Mm-hmm.
there's just a lot of disorder. So I don't believe that a child it's a lot of pressure on a child, on a spiritual son or a spiritual daughter to prove themselves when the fact is either I am accepted or I am rejected. That's where it all begins.
That's good. That's so good.
As long as you're trying to prove yourself, guess what? You'll never be good enough because, spiritual children are not people who become somebody that has to prove
Mm-hmm.
who they are.
Right. Right.
A father should be able to identify his child,
Mm-hmm.
and that's. But I'm really taken back by some of the things that I see,
Yeah.
things here. But it's sad. But that's where people live. Sad to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, I just want to say yet again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for being an honorable, trusted, and secure voice. Because again, I'm sure you, like you already said, you can attest. I've heard tons of stories, and I say it jokingly, but I mean it. I'm like in a space of like, I'm trying to save folk for real. Like, because when you already have biological father issues, you don't need then in a spiritual context to have that either. And it's like a series of events that I think is just hindering men in masculinity in general. And so it's like we got to bring order to this conversation and this thing and literally You have been a sound voice, a trusted voice. Like I said last week after we talked, I was engaged while we were talking, but after I sat back and went back, I said, yo, like, you just dropped some major wisdom. And it really, I don't want to say threw me off, but like I said, I've been in the place of having to unlearn and relearn and embrace this new season and what God has next. So again, I thank you for this. Even I'm looking at comments now where people are saying this is blessing them, this is good, they needed this. So I thank you all for tuning in. Um, and yeah, so again, just in recapping, a son, I think you said it last week too. A father should be rich where a son is not. I think you said something along them lines.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. But my thing would be, a father never needs anything from a son.
yes.
Yeah, I don't. If more than a father needs anything from a child. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look for my children to, as a father, to have to look to them to take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when I am elderly or something like that, even then I don't expect it because I'm trusting God for to satisfy me with health and long life.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need any, I should not go into a father son relationship needing anything from a son.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need a son to send me money
Mm-hmm.
unless he just wants to. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need a son to come over, wash my car.
You
Come,
mean I gotta go do your dishes?
I don't need to do my dishes. I don't need anything from a son. What I desire from a son is that the son would walk in the wisdom that I share,
Mm-hmm.
walk in his own anointing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
a son don't even have to have my mantle.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to see a son walk in his own mantle.
Wow, that's
I don't have to give my son a mantle. Like, here, son, here's my mantle. Now you are. It's it's a lot of confusion.
yeah.
And these things are, there's one I won't name. There's a one popular evangelist, and everybody after he died was talking about, I got his mantle. I got his mantle.
Mm-hmm.
The man only had one. So
Right.
what is this idea that, we look, mantles are given
Mm-hmm.
by God. I want a fresh mantle.
Come on. Yeah,
I
yes.
want I want my I want God to bestow upon me an anointing that is specifically mine, and
Mm-hmm.
not, I don't want to carry another person's mantle. I know about the teachings on mantles and all of that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's good. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not enough for me. I don't want another man's mantle.
Right, right. No, I
I,
agree.
I want my own.
I agree. It's funny, and folks probably think I'm funny, but I'm a nerd when it comes to like um PRs and musical artists and all that. So I love people like Clive Davis, Quincy Jones, and then
Yeah,
Twinkie Clark. And I made a post last night talking about I'm praying for Twinkie Clark, but I mean it because she's a trailblazer, all of them. But to
yeah.
that point, even being inspired by them, not once have I prayed, God, give me their mantle. No, I give me my portion because I don't know what they went through. I don't know what they dealt with. I got my own stuff to deal with. I don't need theirs, But I get when people say it in theory, but nonetheless, if we don't correct these things, it keeps being this confusion and people taking the words and making it literal. And then you now have a generation of people that are misunderstanding the role of a son, a father, and the dynamic of mentor, pastor, and all of that. And so, again, I just thank you so much for doing this. Like I said, the feedback has been great. People are still talking. They said we should bring this to the UK. Listen, send for us. We'll come. um, but um, but yeah, thank you so much. Again,
Thank you.
I ain't gonna take too much of your time, but again, thank you. And y'all share this broadcast. If you have a son, a daughter, whomever, get this type of information out. And also, if you missed last week's conversation, it is on my YouTube channel. You can find it. Just type in Levi Harrell or Levi Harrell Enterprises. You'll see it there. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time, for your
Thank you,
wisdom. Yes, sir. Well, take care, and I will see you next week as we talk about the role of a husband. Y'all
sir.
tune in, mark your calendars, set the time. It's gonna be good. All right, take care.
Have a good one. Bye bye now.
Bye.